This meeting is now being recorded.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Make Your Voice and Data Networks Work for You. My name is Louis Holmeyer and I am the Director of Marketing for ATC, Advanced Technology Consulting, and I will be your moderator today. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with our speakers by typing questions into the chat window or use the Q&A button in the top nav bar to send a question privately. We will be answering questions as posed both during the event and after the presentation. We'd love to have you connect with us and keep the conversation going beyond today's webinar. In fact, we will be covering some topics that alone could be covered solely within a single presentation. So with that in mind, we will provide contact information at the end of the presentation if you'd like to take a deeper dive into any particular topic. Also, we will be recording today's session. We'll make a link available on our website at the4atc.com. First, a little bit about ATC. ATC is an independent telecom boutique and consulting firm. We leverage a portfolio of over 50 technology carriers, working with leaders of mid-sized organizations and enterprises to provide unbiased insight and solution-agnostic counsel. Some IT firms claim expertise across a wide array of segments. They claim to be an inch deep and a mile wide. At ATC, we are the exact opposite, with deep expertise in telecom specifically. That expertise includes voice over IP phone systems, VoIP, voice and data networks, bandwidth, unified communications, cloud computing, and structured cabling. So a little bit today about our presenters here, both Nick, back one. There we go, thank you. Both Nick and Clayton are senior telecom consultants here at ATC. Both have approximately 10 years of experience with ATC and in the industry, and both are instrumental in identifying the technologies, products, services, and providers that allow our clients to operate more efficiently and effectively. Thank you, Nick and Clayton, for being here today.
Thanks for having us. This is just a little bit of an overview of what we'll be covering today. Very high level. There's 5 or 4 real topic points: evolution of voice and data, the benefits of voice over IP, network and bandwidth, and then we'll finalize with business continuity and disaster recovery, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, and to Louis' point earlier, some of this may be high-level information, but if there's something that you want to dive into deeper, we can maybe cover that at the end or offline. We're happy to dig into any of these sections a little deeper.
So with that, let's kick it off with the evolution of voice and data.
So without going into too many details with regards to the history of telecom, because we could have an entire discussion about that, if we just go back, it's already been 30 years, believe it or not, since Judge Green broke up the AT&T and formed the 7 baby bells, or the RBOCs, the regional bell operating companies. And along with that, we've seen the competitive landscape has really changed. A lot more providers, a lot more competition in the marketplace, and what that means for consumers a lot of times is a lot more confusion. The landscape is rapidly evolving, both in terms of mergers and acquisitions, this company being acquired by this company. We've seen them split apart, and now we're starting to see them come back together. Along with that, just the variety of services that are offered by each of the providers. And what happens is it gets incredibly difficult for consumers to try to work their way or navigate their way through those services and providers to find out or find a solution that meets their needs. So that's where we try to come in and help through that process. The little final point here, not necessarily history, but kind of forward-looking. The goal is to sunset, if you will, the PSTN by the year 2020. AT&T is making a push to do away with the traditional TDM network, the copper POTS lines, and all that portion of the business, and move everything to IP. Many companies are already or in the process of making that transition. Others, I guess it remains to be seen whether or not that's going to happen by 2020, but the transition is certainly underway.
Along those same lines, it's a good segue into network convergence. Up until about 10 to 12 years ago, networks were kept completely separate. Most companies had a voice network and a data network, and they were completely siloed separately. As voice over IP, or VoIP, started to ramp up, the term network convergence came about. And it had to do with combining both your voice and data networks into one. Initially, some were skeptical of combining the two networks. They were concerned with things like security, reliability, call quality. They wanted to keep completely separate networks for voice and data. Nowadays, most people would agree there is little benefit to keeping separate networks. Today's advanced networking equipment and technology make it possible for voice and data traffic to traverse the same network without having issues. Next slide. Thank you. Some of the the best times to explore VoIP. The first, obviously, is when you have an aging phone system, you will automatically be evaluating VoIP for your next system. Not many organizations are looking at analog or digital systems anymore. The standard is now VoIP, so an aging system is an obvious one. I had a scenario just the other day where a customer's premise-based legacy voicemail system went bad. The customer was scrambling to get a replacement voicemail system, and after reviewing the options, they found out moving to a VoIP cloud-based phone system would solve all their issues, ultimately save them money over the long term compared to buying that replacement voicemail system. And oh, by the way, they have an entirely new voice over IP phone system. So that was a no-brainer for the customer. The next bullet point, another time to evaluate would be when your network services or your current phone system's maintenance contracts are about to expire. However, just don't wait until the last minute to review these items. Best practices say to begin evaluating 6 months prior to a contract expiring to allow ample time for research, negotiation, and allow time to notify existing vendors of upcoming changes.
Nick, can I interject something there? With regards to the contracts, if you're not certain of your contract status for your voice and or data networks, I would strongly encourage you to find that out as soon as you can. Reason being is you just don't want to have your hands tied and not be able to make a move because you didn't realize a contract was going to auto-renew or something of that effect.
Great point. Yeah, absolutely. The next bullet is something I personally find fulfilling when working with clients. Oftentimes when deploying a phone system, we would discuss how would you like your phone system to work instead of what a lot of companies come to you and say, tell me how your phones work today. Oftentimes organizations get stuck in we always did it this way, so we're always going to do it this way. With today's VoIP phone systems, integrating with different facets of the company makes the company more productive and more efficient. Ultimately, it becomes a productivity tool to integrate with CRM or Outlook. They're integrating with cellular devices, which means our workforce is not tied to one desk or office. Similarly, the next bullet point, today's VoIP systems are also able to provide great flexibility for organizations that have different requirements for different users. The organization can turn on or turn off different features for different users as they see fit. The organization can add users or delete users as they see fit as well. Ultimately, VoIP phone systems allow you to have the phone system you need for that given week or month while only paying for the features that you require. And then finally, the final bullet point here, many of our clients we work with start off by saying, I need a new phone system. But by the end of the implementations, they state our new phone system or the new voice over IP system has changed the way they do business altogether. They have either reduced costs across multiple offices, increased productivity, or have a better understanding of network resources. The list really goes on and on. Some even say it gives them a competitive advantage. For example, a physicians group that we worked with here locally is now answering their patients' phone calls with significantly less hold times, giving patients better access to their physicians through call center applications and IVR systems. These might sound like small things, but they believe these items are key to better overall patient care.
So if we take a closer look into the benefits of voice over IP, kind of two key categories would be hosted versus premise-based systems. Now, there are a lot of different variations. There are pure hosted, pure premise-based, and then there are hybrid systems that incorporate components of both. But for today, we're just going to kind of focus on hosted versus premise and just some of the high-level pros and cons of each. So on the hosted side, and Nick just alluded to this, some of the pros would be paying only for what you need. I mean, a lot of times it's per user based or license based, so you're not paying for more capacity or functionality than what you're actually using. At the same time, you can get out of the phone system business and concentrate on what your company's core business is. The phone system is hosted with the provider in their cloud data center or centers, and you don't have to worry about managing and maintaining that system at your premise. You see enterprise features at SMB price points, okay? So you're not having to come out of pocket for a large upfront expense to get some of the features and functionality that some of the higher-end premise-based systems offer you. And then the last point there would be less CapEx versus a premise-based system, which would be less OpEx. On the hosted model, since it is user-based or subscription-based, a lot of times the upfront costs are a little bit less to get into, but your monthly cost could be a little higher due to that subscription model. Obviously, the reverse or opposite would be true on the premise-based side.
Yeah, that's a good point. And another item on the hosted side, the cons, and it's mentioned there on the slide, vendor dependency. Oftentimes, companies have an issue with this. They're putting their phone system, a key part of their business, into the hands of another company. You need to do your due diligence before making that decision. You need to know everything about that company that you're handing over the keys to your castle, if you will. And then on the premise side, requires heavy IT and lack of remote access. Oftentimes we're seeing premise-based solutions in larger enterprise-sized corporations where they have an IT staff on site and are able to maintain that phone system themselves instead of outsourcing it to another party.
You know, I just want to touch real quick on that vendor dependency as well. While it is true that, yes, you're relinquishing, if you will, your total control of your phone system to that vendor and their hosted environment, you know, the benefits, or one of the benefits, would be just that. They're putting essentially your phone system in their cloud data center where they've got top-of-the-line power backup, the proper cooling. You know, I've got to imagine that their data centers are typically going to be better than what a customer could offer within their own building. But the trade-off is that if something does go down, you can't get your hands on that device right then and there, and you are relying on that vendor to get you back up should there be an issue. So.
Good point.
We ready to move along?
Yeah, the next section that we'll be discussing is SIP trunking. SIP trunking is another way to further consolidate services or eliminate certain network services, if you will. There are a couple ways SIP can be implemented. If you already have a SIP-enabled PBX, the SIP trunks can plug straight into the PBX. If you have a legacy PBX that might be connected by PRIs or analog lines, the carrier will deploy an integrated access device, or an IAD, that will then hand off analog lines or trunks into your current PBX. In this scenario, instead of paying for something like a PRI, which comes with a packaged 23 channels, SIP trunks allows you to select the exact number of concurrent call paths you want at any given time. These trunks ride over either the internet or private network back to the carrier and are easily scalable. This is a great benefit for multi-location organizations that may have PRIs and or analog lines at several different locations. You could then pull all of your SIP trunks together across all locations, obviously saving you time and resources. These are just a few of the many benefits of SIP trunks.
Right. So the key there being, again, multi-location. If you have PRIs in multiple locations, either locally throughout the country, to be able to pull those resources. And then also, Nick, I know you mentioned the scalability, the fact that you can order call paths or concurrent sessions either one at a time, 5 at a time, 10 at a time, as opposed to in blocks of 23 like you would with a PRI. The other point there is that some providers will allow you to do like a BYOB, if you will, bring your own broadband. So you could already have your own broadband connection. Say you have a 20, 30, 50 meg internet connection with another provider. There are providers out there that will let you, layer their SIP trunks on top of that existing connection. So
another way we don't have diagrammed here would be a multi-location office that the headquarters has a SIP-enabled PBX, but they also have remote sites across the country that may not have or have the need for a SIP-based PBX. We were just discussing hosted phone systems before. We have the ability to integrate SIP trunking at the corporate location and then hosted PBXs at the remote locations. So that gives you both flavors. Then you have SIP trunking at the corporate headquarters and then hosted at the remote sites where it makes sense.
Right. That leads to the most efficient way to integrate all your locations.
Very good. The next piece of this is the unified communications. Voice is only one piece in the communication puzzle. Today's organizations are demanding unified communications, also known as UC. UC brings all of the communication tools together as one unified solution. As we spoke earlier, we now have voice and data converged together now. UC now integrates your phone system with Lync and Office 365. With that, we are now receiving voicemails and faxes and email boxes. We are working remotely. When working remotely, the phone system is intelligent enough to ring my mobile phone via Find Me, Follow Me feature that can easily be set up by an end user. Businesses' CRMs are now integrated with their phone system to produce a screen pop when the customer calls in, to whether it be a call center or to a sales force. Also, these products used to be all siloed with no integration with each other. Now we're talking the integration with these products are being demanded by the customers.
Yeah. In addition, along with the items that you mentioned there, Nick, a lot of the newer phone systems out there have, and he kind of touched on mobile integration, but literally an application that will run on an iPhone or an Android or a Windows Phone device, and it makes it appear as though you are calling from your desk. So you can make calls from your cell phone, and it'll still project your office number. So if you want to try to protect your cell phone number, and on the flip side, incoming calls. If somebody calls into your office phone or extension, it can ring your cell phone and still give the appearance that, hey, I took this call right at my office desk. So I know we're going to touch on it a little bit later, but it kind of gets back to the Internet of Things. Since more and more things are becoming IP-based, you're able to integrate more and more of these components. It's all just a matter of figuring out how the IP traffic is supposed to flow. So when you're talking about these new systems, there are a lot of different ways to get into a new phone system in terms of finances. Every company is different. Cash flow is different for every company. Some of them have budgeted certain amounts for a year and say, hey, I know I'm going to need a phone system, so I'm going to budget a decent-sized CapEx amount. Others say, you know what, I need a system right now. I don't really have the money up front, but I'm willing to take a little bit of hit on the monthly cost just so I can get into this. So there are purchase and lease options. but there are also rental options on the phone system. So you are renting the phone handsets themselves, and in some cases even the switches and routers from the provider. And some people might say, well, why would you want to rent all that stuff? That seems like it could be, pretty expensive. Wouldn't you want to own it? Again, different companies have different philosophies when it comes to technology and whether they want to own it or not. Some say, well, no, I don't want to own it because chances are it's going to, technology is ever changing, or these handsets going to become obsolete. I want to rent it and know that, I can always get an upgrade, or, if my phone is to go bad, the provider is going to replace it with a like model or one better if that type model is no longer available. So really we just try to help the client see all the different options, and then it's really up to them to decide what makes the most sense for them and their company.
Yeah, we typically will show many different ways of owning or renting or leasing the phone systems that we're presenting to clients, and oftentimes we'll spread it across a 10-year total cost of ownership, so everybody has a full understanding of what they can expect to spend on this phone system over the next 10 years.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because there have been several times where we might look at a 3-year snapshot, and one provider, in terms of just strictly dollars, may look better than another. But if you stretch that out over the 5 or 10 year, all of a sudden there's been a flip-flop, and the customer will say, well, wait a minute, we need to take a closer look at this, because chances are you're not going to be replacing your phone system every 3 to 5 years. That's generally a 10-year investment.
Even more so on the premise-based phone systems, when you start talking about maintenance and license agreements and different things like that. All of those have to be accounted for when evaluating a new phone system. So we wanted to tell you a little bit about a couple successes we've had recently. The first one being St. Elizabeth Physicians based in northern Kentucky. This is what we're going to consider our hosted success story. St. Elizabeth Physicians, at the time, about 2 years ago, originally deployed 77 locations, which is a physicians group that was essentially 2 mergers put together and a bunch of acquisitions on top of that. At the time we engaged with them, each office handled their own telecom and phone system needs. They had contracts with various vendors and carriers and had no standardized phone system solution. For obvious reasons, supporting an operation like this was near impossible for the management team. SEP opted to go with a fully managed cloud-based phone system that standardized across each office, provided outsourced help desk support, which was a key benefit for them, ultimately increased productivity, drove down hold times, increased patient satisfaction, and provided disaster recovery solutions for each office. Since this initial deployment, we've added over 15 more offices on this system. Being cloud-based, it's a highly scalable solution. 2 quotes we have from the management at SEP from the deployment states that at 90% of all calls get a first call resolution, and that the hold times were cut in half since we implemented this new phone system roughly 2 years ago.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what you were saying a couple slides ago about, just some of the benefits of voice over IP and how it can change people's business. And some people might say, well, how is a new phone system really going to change my business? But, I mean, these are just 2 great examples where those 2 stats or quotes, if you will, those are huge for a business. On the premise-based side, we use the example of Jeff Weiler Automotive Family. When we started out with them, they had about 13 or 14 locations, mainly dealerships, and then 1 corporate office that were on an older Mitel platform-based phone system. Wasn't much continuity between the offices, and it lacked a lot of the features and functionality that the dealerships needed and that newer phone systems had. So we kind of helped them work through a phased rollout plan, and they've been able to implement a new ShoreTel premise-based IP phone system at most of their locations. There are a few left, and again, that's just part of the phased rollout and when they have the resources to get those systems implemented. After they had the vendor perform the first couple of installations, Brian Hoffman, who you see there is the director of IT at Jeff Weiler, he now handles all the new phone system implementations himself. That's kind of how easy the rollout was of this particular system. The time to get a new location spun up and online has been significantly reduced, and the ongoing management and maintenance of the system is greatly simplified. He can essentially manage his entire system, all the locations, remotely for just about any issues or moves, adds, changes that he may want to take care of. So I know it's been a big help to him. So moving on a little bit here, off of the phone systems into network and bandwidth would be our next topic. And as you probably all know, the explosion of bandwidth and just the overall increase in consumption of bandwidth, it's really increasing at an exponential pace right now. Nick touched on voice and data convergence earlier, where he's got a single circuit that is carrying both your voice and data traffic. We talk about the proliferation of cloud applications and cloud technologies. That seems to be the buzzword now, is the cloud. We got to move to the cloud. Well, as you do that, you're taking up more and more bandwidth. It's all IP based.
Yeah, a lot of our clients now are really taking a hard look at increasing bandwidth at not just the headquarters, but all remote sites. Oftentimes, if you ask a company, how's your bandwidth speeds, they kind of look at you sideways. And maybe the mid to large size companies have a better understanding of their utilization, but the medium size, small and medium, oftentimes have no clue. And if you ask them how are their speeds, they say they're okay or they're slow. They're never really satisfied. We're able to then go in and show them their utilization, and they're maxing out on an everyday basis. And almost all clients now are looking at bandwidth upgrades and increases.
That's kind of one of those things where you don't realize it until after you've been upgraded. Like you've been used to that speed of internet or of moving data for so long, it just seems normal to you, and you don't realize what's available out there.
Even more so when you're moving to cloud-based services and you're putting your servers and production servers into a cloud scenario, that 1 to 2 second delay over the course of a day, over a course of a company, can be quite significant when you're talking about the cost of time and the cost of employee productivity.
And along with that, we mentioned the Internet of Things, just the idea that everything is becoming more and more IP-based. I mean, we've got home security and surveillance that's IP-based. You can check it from your cell phone or iPad. You've got refrigerators and thermostats and smart TVs that are all connected to the Internet now. This is all, and some of this or a lot of this may be more consumer-based than business-based, but it's certainly infiltrating businesses as well. Especially that last bullet point when you talk about media, the videos and the high-def camera images and video images that businesses are using either on their websites or just different things that you encounter throughout the day. It's all a drain on that bandwidth and that Internet connection.
We work with network carriers every day, and oftentimes we'll have technicians out at customer sites that are in network rooms, and they'll take pictures of the network demarcation point where all the network services come in to prove they did a job or completed some work, and then they would upload those to their servers. And each of those pictures are 3, 5, 7 megs if they're high definition pictures. And I think we're going to see more of that across organizations. It's simply mind-boggling of how much is going to be pushed across these networks when you start talking about media, high-definition videos, and so forth.
So what are your options as far as bandwidth and Internet connectivity? We just run through these real quick. Some are going to be familiar to you. Cable broadband here in Cincinnati area would be your Time Warner cable connection, for example. These are considered best effort services. There are no SLAs or service level agreements. They're saying here's the package that you're signed up for. We can't promise that you're going to get that all the time, every time. We're going to make a best effort. It's a shared service, so depending on how many other people in your area or neighborhood are also using Time Warner Cable's connections, that's going to have an impact on your bandwidth and your speed. DSL, also considered, I know this one's been around for a while, but also considered a best effort service, delivered over a copper line, and it's distance sensitive, how far you are from the nearest CO or central office. The further you are, the greater chances you have for either having circuit degradation or speed issues. Again, no SLAs typically tied to those. Now, on the plus side, these are generally considered low-price options. Especially with cable, you can get a fair amount of bandwidth at a decent cost when compared to, say, an Ethernet connection. Cable and DSL, a lot of times folks will use those as a backup option, something that can help them limp along should their primary connection go down.
One item that's not listed on here that would go with those two would be optics, right?
Yeah.
It's probably right along the same lines as cable and DSL.
Sure.
Higher bandwidth, but same reliability. Even though some of the carriers in the business, even in the Time Warner Cable business class, on the cable side, they'll provide business class SLAs on them, but really it's a price point, right? So you're only going to get a piece of the compensation back if you were to have an outage. At an $80 a month circuit, that's not a big deal to the carrier, but for you to be down a day, that's probably a significant hit.
Just continuing on down the list there, T1s or N by T1s, which would simply be bonded T1s. If you were to put 2 or 3 together, it would be an N by T1. Obviously, you go back 10 years, this was kind of the way to go if you needed fast, reliable, stable, secure internet. It was a T1. Over the last couple of years, obviously, things have started to move towards Ethernet and fiber connectivity as the networks build out their footprint. And T1s are starting to go by the wayside. There are still some times where T1s may be the only option because of a company's location. Maybe they have a rural location that doesn't have a cable option or DSL or fiber, but somebody's able to run a T1 out there. It's not always pretty when it comes to price, but sometimes that's the only option. It is dedicated service to you, and there are SLAs backing that service up. Not very scalable because, again, you're adding them in increments of a T1, so 1.5 megabits at a time. Ethernet over copper, I kind of look at it as DSL on steroids. It is distance sensitive like DSL, but you can get higher bandwidth speeds than you can generally attain with DSL. And last but not least, certainly Ethernet/fiber. This is really the way that everyone seems to be going lately. I mean, when I look at our business here, between the phone systems, this is the other thing that's really keeping us busy is, like you alluded to earlier, Nick, companies just looking for more bandwidth. Fiber gives you the ability to turn up in very short notice. Maybe you start off with a 10 meg connection. That can easily be bumped up to 20 meg, 50 meg, even 100 meg, usually within the span of a couple days.
A couple days, sure. That is normally the way companies are going in the metropolitan areas. It's obviously a little less available in the rural areas, but the carriers are building out. This is what the networks are going to be based on from here forward, so they're getting away from the copper-based and going fiber-based. So it will be across the country at some point. It's just a matter of time.
Well, another big benefit of the fiber versus the copper is just it's a lot more reliable as it relates to weather. I mean, if those of you that are on T1s and you've had a big rainstorm come through or the copper pair gets wet, it can take your T1 down or at least cause some quality issues. Fiber is much more protected and more reliable from that standpoint.
That and just the architecture of fiber rings being built. A fiber ring is essentially if one end of your fiber is cut, it can go around the other side of the ring and still provide you service. So that doesn't always help you if a backhoe or a car runs into the telephone pole, but oftentimes it is much more reliable than a T1.
Okay. So we'll move into a couple different types of wide area networking here, VPNs and MPLS connectivity. Again, if you were to go back several years, MPLS kind of came on the scene, and people viewed that as a highly reliable, secure way to transmit data between multiple location offices. It's generally a little more expensive than the alternative, which would be, we see more and more recently, the VPN method. So instead of getting a private data connection through an MPLS service at each location, customers are using either their existing internet connections or maybe beefing up their existing internet connections and then running that data traffic over a VPN, a virtual private network. I guess if you were to look at some of the pros and cons of each, cost would be a big factor. The MPLS network is going to be a little more expensive, but the trade-off is that it's generally considered to be a little more secure. It's dedicated to you, so your traffic isn't running at any point over the public network, the public internet, if you will.
Some of the pros to MPLS would be that the voice tagging across the network, or at least the packet tagging across the network, is carried across the network. In the VPN scenario, it's controlled by the routers on each end, so you would not have that ability. But on the flip side, in the IPVPN scenario, you have an internet circuit at each site. So you have internet connectivity, internet circuits at each location, where an MPLS is just a node of MPLS. You receive no internet access off of that. So that's something to consider when designing a network is, am I okay with a single point on my MPLS providing internet for all 40 of my locations? If I'm not, maybe an IPVPN is the way to go, so I have internet access at each location in case of something going wrong.
Yep, that's a great point. You know, and again, that's kind of part of what we try to help customers work through is just to show them the options. You know, some people may think, well, I have to do an MPLS network because I've got multi-locations, we've got to move this data back and forth. Well, do you, or, you know, is there another option that may work for you, assuming you're okay with the trade-offs? And whatever those may be, we try to help point those out.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, we're trying to design the best possible network, the best possible solution for your business's needs.
So if we jump into the next category here, business continuity and DR, a few different points here. When you're talking about networks, I guess the first bullet point, we'd be referring to your data network. So obviously, as more and more traffic becomes IP-based, and Nick talked about convergence, now you're relying on voice and data over potentially one connection. It's more important than ever that you've got a backup plan in place, some failover, some redundancy. You know, I mentioned maybe you've got a primary fiber circuit, but if it goes down for some reason, do you have a cable or DSL circuit that can, again, just help you limp along until the primary circuit comes back? You know, there are statistics out there that speak to how disastrous it can be for a business to be down for even a day or two. Small and medium businesses really have a hard time absorbing those types of hits. On the phone system side, you know, what plans do you have in place today if your phone system goes down at your main office today? Are those calls automatically routing to either another office or another number? What message are your customers hearing? Are they getting dead air? Are they getting a busy signal? Or are those calls just being routed somewhere else and your end user doesn't really know any different? You know, when we talk about hosted versus premise-based, one of the benefits of hosted voice over IP systems is, again, your system is hosted in that provider's data center, and oftentimes multiple data centers. Generally, there are, you know, 2 or 3 backups in those in different data centers. So you're gaining some disaster recovery and some business continuity when you're using those hosted voice over IP systems.
The next bullet point talks to data centers. Many organizations nowadays are looking at data centers for keeping their servers up and running, whether it be a colo scenario or simply DR. A data center needs to be researched for your organization. Gone are the days of trusting that tape backup in the closet somewhere that never gets tested. If you already have servers in a data center, why haven't you considered putting your phone system in a data center, talking back to what Clayton was just talking about? Isn't that phone system just as important as your servers? What if your customers are calling in and getting busy signals? How long will that last before they move to another provider of services? And then the next bullet would be cloud, which ties right in with the data center. Cloud is a hot topic nowadays, and yet the term really remains ambiguous. Ultimately, cloud is any time servers are hosted in a data center. However, typically those servers are then managed, maintained, and physically owned by a cloud provider who is providing you use of the servers, typically based on a cost per month or cost per consumption. Inherently, this provides greater uptime and is highly scalable for customers' use. And the final bullet here is security. Security is something we view here at ATC as an up-and-coming topic in the IT industry, if it isn't already. Everybody has kind of heard about the issues that have gone on at Target or PF Chains where the networks have been compromised. If you don't think that's a big deal, Target's CEO stepped down because of what happened when their network was compromised. We think these attacks are just the tip of the iceberg and what is going to end up happening at the small and mid-sized business level. The problem is the small, mid, to large-sized businesses can't handle a hit that Target took. Businesses need to look for trusted partners that can help determine where they're vulnerable and assist in fixing these issues.
That's the key, Nick. I mean, now that security is becoming more and more important, just because of the additional IP traffic that we've been talking about for the last half hour here, more and more IP traffic means hackers are going to be more and more interested in gaining access to that IP traffic and that data. So align yourself with vendors and partners that can help you identify maybe where your network is weak and also help you shore it up so that you can prevent, at least to the best of your abilities, those things from happening.
Yeah, I was just talking to a business owner the other day where he has an e-commerce site and somebody hacked in and held his website hostage, if you will, for a ransom. And he said it lasted about 6 weeks. The police and FBI were involved, and ultimately they paid the money because their system was their business was going to go down if they didn't have that up and operational.
For something that probably could have been prevented had they spent a little money.
Little money on the front end.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick and Clayton. That was very informative. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line, and if you have a question, feel free to ask. We fielded a couple questions already, one being the presentation will be available online, and I will send you a link.
All guests have been muted. All guests have been unmuted.
Great. So everybody's unmuted. If you have a question, please feel free to ask.
So you mentioned that you were going to send the presentation out.
Yep. I'm going to send a link when it's available online at our website.
Any questions out there, feel free to speak up. We've unmuted all the lines.
Okay.
No icebreakers?
Since there are no questions, I'll assume we covered all our topics well. Thank you for joining us. You will be receiving the email, as I stated, to alert you of the on-demand status of today's event so that you can review the material or go back over it. On behalf of our presenters, Nick and Clayton, as well as the folks at West IP for supporting our efforts today, my name is Louis Holmeyer, and we wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Increase revenue to CincyTech. Brands to strengthen our region's entrepreneurship.